libertarian way of managing the crisis. Voilà. That's what I want to sell to you today. Okay, I'll get back to. Okay, so now what is my argument? The argument I want to make to you is that it's good for the growth of a country to have what I call counter-cyclical policy. What do I mean by counter-cyclical policy? A counter-cyclical policy, it's a policy that eases things for firms and consumers in recession, but of course tightens things in period of booms. So for example, it would mean that you could do more budget deficit in recession, but you reduce your budget deficit in booms. That's when it comes to fiscal. But when it comes to the monetary side, it means that you lower short-term interest rates in a recession, but you increase short-term interest rate in an expansion. What I want to argue here is that this kind of policies is good for long-run growth. So you should not just measure them in terms of Keynesian multiplier, you should look at long-run growth and show that there are growth effects of such policies. Now, what my argument is, why is it good to have counter-cyclical policies? The reason is the following, is because firms face credit constraints. Okay, so because they face credit constraints, they cannot invest more than a multiple of their cash flow, essentially. If they were not credit constrained, they could borrow always up to the net present value of future profits. But when they are credit constraints, they cannot borrow more than a multiple of their cash flow. In recessions, the cash flow is bad, is low. So it means in recession, they don't have much possibility to borrow. But that may be bad when you do some things like R&D, like training, like skill, investment in skills, investment in IT equipment. Those are long-term investments which you need to redo and pursue. The problem is that if you have a recession and you are credit constrained, you may not be able to sustain this investment over the long run. But you know, R&D is like a race. If I race with you and you are in a good shape, and I cannot maintain my R&D investment in bad times, I lose the race against you. And if I anticipate that I will lose the race because I will be vulnerable in recession, I may not even engage in R&D investment in the first place. So what I want to argue is that it's important to help firms sustain growth-enhancing investment over the cycle through having counter-cyclical policies. Why? Because in fact, if you don't, credit-constrained firms see its R&D suffers from volatility. Why is volatility bad? Volatility means a worse recession and maybe a bigger expansion. But you know, Costas talked about that before. There is an asymmetry. If in a recession, I'm typically more credit constrained. So a deeper recession will lower a lot the R&D I can do without help. Whereas the bigger expansion will not make much of a difference because maybe in a recession, in an expansion phase, I already essentially escaped from the credit constraint. This asymmetry is the key. You see what I mean? You see what I mean? When you are credit constrained, more volatility makes you lower a lot your R&D in recession without making much change in expansion. So on average, your R&D goes down. And that's true for any kind of growth-enhancing investment. If you understood that, you understand that you need counter-cyclical policies. That's the theory part. You see, I didn't put any equation. You asked me no equation. So that's the idea, okay? So now I want to argue that based on that, I will show you evidence that counter-cyclical policies are more growth-enhancing for firms or sectors that are more credit-constrained, okay? So that's what I said before. Reducing aggregate volatility enhances growth more in firms that are more credit constrained, in part because firms are more credit constrained in low states. These growth-enhancing effects should therefore be particularly strong in low states, in recessions. This suggests a role for counter-cyclical and monetary policy to enhance R&D or other type of growth-enhancing policy over the business cycle. Okay, so now what I want to do is I will show you regressions, I will show you tables where I regress growth on the counter-cyclicality of fiscal or monetary policy interacted with the extent to which a sector is credit constrained. Now, when you have a regression, you may be worried about reverse causality. You might say, well, you know, you get correlations, but maybe it doesn't show anything about the effect of counter-cyclical policy on growth. It may rather tell you something about the effect of growth on the ability to conduct counter-cyclical policy. Because you could say, for example, I have a high growth rate, therefore my public debt is reduced, because I have a lower public debt, raising expenditure or cutting tax in bad time is easier for me to do. So I have to make sure that I'm capturing the causality from the counter-cyclicality of the policy to growth and not the reverse causality, okay? So the solution we use is to use a paper that I'm sure you've heard about by Rajan and Zingales, 1998, which is the idea that you interact macroeconomic policy, which is a country-wide policy, with industry characteristics that are shared between your sector and a sector in another country, like the US. And therefore, you solve the endogeneity problem by having this methodology. I will be more precise in a moment by what I mean, okay? So what I will argue is that macroeconomic, counter-cyclical, fiscal and monetary will have more growth-enhancing effects, more in industry whose US equivalents are either more credit constrained, I mean have lower asset tangibility or more financial dependence, or more liquidity constrained. And I will show you measures of liquidity constraints. So that's what I'm after. I don't have a beamer there, so I should jump to get the equation, but no, it's not too bad. So the main equation I want to regress, I will show not more than two equations, so that's one of them. So I consider sectors in countries. So I look at OECD countries, and I look at 16 OECD countries and 45 manufacturing sectors. So I stands for sector, C for country. And I'm looking at the average growth rate of industry I and country C over a 25-year period, 1980-2005. And I regress over alpha I is what I call an industry fixed effect. That means I want to control for the fact that various industries have characteristics. So that's an industry fixed effect. The beta C is what I call a country fixed effect. It could be that there are some peculiarities with countries I want to abstract from. And the most interesting thing is the interaction between SCI and FPC. So what is SCI? SCI is the extent to which sector I is credit constrained, is likely to be credit constrained. So what I do is that I look at the equivalent sector in the US, and I say, well, if the equivalent sector to the US has very little collateral, has very little machines it can use as collateral for loan, or is very dependent on external finance, or is liquidity constrained, that's my SCI, that's my measure of credit constraint. You see what I mean? And it turns out that if you rank between different sectors across OECD countries, the ranking is the same. So I know that a more credit constrained sector in the US is also capturing a more credit constrained sector in Italy or in France, you see? So that's the one thing. And FPC is the country-specific measure of how the government in Italy, for example, conduct a fiscal or monetary. And of course, monetary is done in Frankfurt, but for the euro. But think of the fiscal; it's done at the country level. You see what I mean? So that's the extent to. So one is an industry characteristic, one is the country characteristic, and the idea is that this coefficient there is this gamma, which is the interaction coefficient, should be positive. That means the more credit constrained the industry is, the more growth in that industry benefits from a more counter-cyclical fiscal or monetary policy at the country level. Okay, that's what I want to show you. Okay. Now the problem is how you measure counter-cyclical policy. So I will look first at fiscal, and then I will move to monetary. So FPC will be fiscal policy counter-cyclicality. Then I will have an MPC, which is monetary policy counter-cyclicality. So for the moment, let me concentrate on fiscal. So how you look at fiscal? You look at fiscal with another equation, and then I have no more equation. Okay, that's the auxiliary equation. Okay, the auxiliary equation is just to know what does it mean that Italy is more or less pro-cyclical. It means that you react to recession differently. What does it mean I'm counter-cyclical fiscal policy? It means that in a recession, I do more deficit in recession, less deficit in expansion. So for example, what typically you do, you look at something like fiscal balance, the extent to which you have a fiscal surplus or fiscal deficit, and you regress that on the GDP gap, which means the difference between your actual GDP and the difference between your trend GDP and your actual GDP. So you have that's your GDP gap. If you find a FPC coefficient, so you do a regression, you have 25 years, for each country, you can calculate the extent to which it's counter-cyclical or pro-cyclical by running this regression. Okay? And I will show you in a moment graphs about that. If you find the FPC which is positive, it means that you are counter-cyclical, that indeed you will have a bigger fiscal balance when your gap is positive. But when your gap is negative and you are in a recession, you should do a fiscal deficit. So a positive coefficient means that you're counter-cyclical. A negative one means that you are pro-cyclical. Okay? So that's the very simple way of doing it. Barrow would have a paper in 1979 where he would have done it this way, and we show it makes no difference if you use the Barrow 79. But I don't want to get into this at the moment. So now the data, I use industry level, 45 manufacturing industries for 16 OECD countries plus the US. The financial dependence data come from Rajan Zingales and the updated version by Radatz, asset tangibility from Brown and Laraine. All are based on CompuStat, and the macro variables come from OECD and World Bank development data set. And so those are you look at industries in countries, it's cross-country, cross-industry, cross-country panel data. Okay, so here is the thing where I'm very ashamed. I have to apologize because I was invited, it's a conference where a lot of nice things were said about me by citizens from Italy and citizens from Greece. I feel terribly bad because here I'm showing the counter-cyclicality of fiscal policy, and you see the pro-cyclical are Greece and Italy. Is that okay? But you told me I could show that slide yesterday because you said that you should pass fast on that slide. So everybody else is more or less counter-cyclical, you see? So of course the very good guys are my preferred, the Swedes, you see, and Denmark, the Scandinavians. Yeah, my girlfriend is Swedish, you know. That's the cyclicality of policy. So that's interesting to see, you know, who is more or less pro-cyclical or counter-cyclical. So that's when I use total fiscal balance as the left-hand side of this equation. If I use primary fiscal balance, I exclude payments from and debt payments from and to the government. Then I get, when I use the primary, it's even bigger, you see. So that the blue line, by the way, you might ask, why do you have blue and red? The blue is the value of the coefficient, and the red is the 10% interval, confidence interval. That's what it is. But you see again, Greece and Italy pro-cyclical. The other guy is counter-cyclical, but particularly Sweden and Denmark. So that's very, so now you may want to ask yourself, what makes some countries more or less pro-cyclical? And that's not the focus of my paper, but I will show you a few things. So for example, here, can you see the picture or you can't see the picture when you are in the back? Can you see the picture? Not very well, huh? Here I am showing, I am showing the relationship between the size of government, which I measure by average primary fiscal expenditure to GDP, and the counter-cyclicality. And what you show there, these increasing curves show you that you have a positive correlation between size of government and counter-cyclicality. So now you could say Italy is a counter-example because you have a large government size and you are pro-cyclical. But in general, it seems to be a positive relation because you include automatic stabilizers. Usually, the more counter-cyclical countries have automatic stabilizers there. That contributes to make them bigger. But of course, it's a general. It's important to introduce those because when I will do show the second stage regression, I want to make sure that I'm capturing the effect of counter-cyclicality, not the effect of covariates like this one, which is that are positively correlated with it. That's another word I'm showing you, fiscal discipline.